thank you. I'm so proud and honored to be here this evening to introduce David France, who created certainly the best documentary of the past year. And one of the most moving and powerful films I've ever seen. How to Survive a Plague is a film of such humanity and artistry that, as much as I've tried, to anyone who will listen, I cannot overstate its significance as a film, as a document, as a definitive history of Larry Kramer's band of troublemakers act up, and of how a relative few desperate, resourceful, blindingly smart young men and women without portfolio invented the protocols by which the hideous cluster of diseases that make up AIDS would eventually be treated. In making this film, David has made a masterpiece, one of the great dramas of this or any time. The story of those who dedicated what they thought were the last months of their own lives to save the lives of strangers. In fact, while we're presenting David this wonderful award tonight, can you also bring out the Oscar he deserves for this film, please? It's my honor to introduce David, but before I do that, I would like to take a moment and thank Live Out Loud. You see, I come from a tiny town in southeast Texas, and without even straining my memory, I can conjure the faces of several friends who were abandoned by their families or subjected to violence by them, shunned as pariahs to society and to God. Because where I come from, God's will and our own personal biases always coincided perfectly. It's funny, it's a miracle, really, if you think about it. All for the unpardonable act of being honest about who they were, immutably, as human beings. Of course, the biggest room in a town like mine is always the closet, because there are no gay people in Highlands, Texas. Just ask anybody, and I'll tell you. It was in this world that my big brother Craig lived, and it was in this world that he died. How Craig could have used the mercy and the wisdom and the mentor's guidance of Live Out Loud. On behalf of my brother Craig, in commemoration of his unlived life, and for all the other Craigs out there who sometimes feel so alone in a pitiless world, I offer my sincere thank you to Live Out Loud. And thank you as well for recognizing this extraordinary film. My brother Craig died 19 years ago now, but Craig was also my godfather, and so he and I still talk all the time. And after I saw David's film early last summer, I staggered out of the screening room and walked around for a couple hours telling Craig all about it. I told him about these heroes who literally offered their bodies so that others might live. And by submitting themselves to the billy club and to jail, by surrendering their dignity, they were as dignified as human beings can be. But mostly I told him about how humbling I found How to Survive a Plague to be, because it was a story that I did not know. And I thought I knew everything I needed to know about AIDS. But I didn't know anything. France is an artist, and that is what artists do. They make us look at familiar things in new ways. And no future history of the plague years can be written without reckoning with the work of David France. I think we have the film clip.
They engage in offensive and revolting conduct that has led to the proliferation of AIDS. If they would keep their mouths shut, nobody would ever say a word and we wouldn't know anything about it. But no, they march in the streets. They defy you.
To be that threatened and to not lay down, to stand up and to fight back is just incredible.
We need our government to read this plan to save our lives.
Scientists agree with this. Why can't we have it? We are the ones who are fighting for people's lives.
We did something remarkable.
It's my honor to introduce David France.
I have a voice. So like many gay people of my generation, I grew up thinking that I was the only person who felt the way that I felt. There were no gay people in public life then. There were no teachers, no politicians, no characters on television. It was an isolating and a dangerous time. I didn't come out until my senior year of college, and with a few friends, we quietly formed a support group. We had to meet off campus and in secret. Still, word seeped out about our group, and we received violent death threats. And as a sign of how backward things were then, the president of our college, a liberal arts college, not only ignored the dangers, but when an article about them was published in the college paper, he recalled every copy from every news box and every rack on campus. We weren't even allowed to condemn the violence ourselves. And although the details may vary, this is a common story, I know it. I tell it uneasily. I don't like returning to the sunless forests of my youth, but it explains the optimism that I brought with me to New York City, chasing the promise of Stonewall. That optimism lasted barely 3 weeks after I left college, until July 3rd, 1981, when the first story of a mysterious new disease hit the papers. Whatever survival skills that we had learned along the way barely prepared us for what was to come next. It's taken me many years to begin making sense of what happened in the plague. For the longest time, I could only see the trauma of it, the ghosts of young men, and eventually young women too, who brought their own optimism to a doomed New York City. The village was a graveyard of remembered friends. I kept the names of the people that I lost in a book in my desk drawer, and beneath each of their names I had written a few sentences, remembering their last words, often expressions of fury or resignation to their fates. But more recently, as our community has turned to marriage equality and the fight against bullying, I began to recognize the many positive things that came from the plague years in America. That's the story I tell in How to Survive a Plague. In their epic battle to survive, the gay men and lesbians of ACT UP did more for advancing LGBT issues than anything that came before. The advances in the first 20 years post-Stonewall pale in comparison to the 2 decades that followed. We wouldn't be awaiting 2 momentous Supreme Court decisions now on marriage if it weren't for them. From the ashes of so much death came a vast and powerful social justice movement that has changed America more rapidly than anything the country has seen before. ACT UP showed us that nothing is insurmountable, that a detested minority can correct the culture, that untrained outsiders can save millions of lives. Their impact on science and medicine is a magisterial contribution to humanity. Some have argued for giving them a Nobel Prize. There are online petitions asking President Obama to give them the medals of freedom. I just wanted people to know that gay men and lesbians fought the plague to its knees and made it possible with drugs to survive. I want people to remember that we benefit from that legacy every day. Thank you, Mark, for your generous and lovely introduction. I also want to thank everybody involved in Live Out Loud for the work that you do and for this honor tonight. Thank you.